Welcome to episode 2 of Unsolicited Inspiration, where I just get to say whatever I want because that's how this works, my friends. Thank you to whoever listened to episode 1, and your feedback has given me some good positive reinforcement to keep going. So here goes. Let's get right back into it. I know some people here have seen my videos on Yid with a Lid and have seen how big of a struggle it has been to get where I'm trying to go to. People really just don't have the patience. While I was doing this over the last year, it dawned on me that ever since October 7th, so many of these, so-called influencers have really risen to fame by just posting stuff about Israel. It didn't matter what you did before, right? I mean, you could be a personal trainer or a fashion designer or someone who just is an influencer who just wears nice clothes and goes on good vacations. You could have been a dancer like a Montana Tucker. The second you start posting for Israel and you have all these followers already, you now all of a sudden become like an authority where people care about what you say. You are now a spokesperson, and I really applaud that, right? Anyone who can use their platform to do any good should. So it is a beautiful thing to see. But it kind of got me thinking, like, are people becoming dumb? Like, I'll post 60-second Torah ideas, the Torah that a lot of these people live their lives based on, where they celebrate their holidays based on what the Torah says. They eat kosher, they keep Shabbos, whatever it is. And people really don't have much of an attention span for it. But along this journey, I realized that if I just wore an Israeli soldier outfit while saying what I said, I could literally become famous overnight. Like it's actually a joke, right? Like I'm actually thinking about doing it. I know this is crazy because I'm telling you all, but I'm really thinking about getting like an IDF costume, not costume, a uniform from my friend here who has one because he's actually a reservist in the IDF. But just wearing it in my videos and just seeing if, 500 views becomes 5,000 views. It's kind of crazy to me how I know October 7th was obviously a very sad day and a big deal, and there's been a lot of media and support around the Jewish people and covering it. So I'm not getting into any of that. I'm literally just talking about the fact that these days, if anyone does anything related to Israel, it automatically gets a lot more attention. And I feel like, without calling anyone out, a lot of people have kind of, you know, they're riding the coattails of thousands of people dying in order to get famous, in order to get some, Insta love or social media love. Um, while I was thinking about that, I it also dawned on me that, you know, as you start following these accounts, you really see that, like let's say Meaningful Minute, most of the stuff that they're posting is either Israel related today or something sad, right? Something that someone had to overcome, some obstacle. This guy went to jail. That guy lost his mom. Now they're still, living their lives successfully, even through the pain and the struggle. And, as someone who wants to succeed in reaching people, reaching Jewish people who need Torah, or just trying to change people's perspective, yes, in a very unsolicited, unasked for way. Um, it's kind of like, well, I just don't have that negativity or sadness bias. It's like, I just want to be positive about everything. I don't want to focus on the negative. Like, I get it. It happens. It's here. It's real. That's life. But like, what do we do based on that? Where do we go from here? And as I'm exploring and trying to grow my social media presence, it just dawned on me that maybe I should start like, I don't know, just like visiting cancer patients and then taking a video of myself giving them the Dvar Torah that I try to give you guys. Like, would that boost my sales? I mean, these aren't really sales and it's not a business for me, but this whole thing got me thinking, like, what is up with the Jewish people and just loving sadness? Like, I really don't get it. Why are we so focused on, oh, this story was so heartwarming. This guy went to jail. That guy, she died. He died. There was a fire. They were taken from their homes. I get that like pulls on our heartstrings, but how come that is what influences us to do good? Why is it that we live in a world that unless you can walk into most shuls across the country and comes Yom Kippur when they want you to like dig down into your deepest part of you to just serve God, most rabbis are talking about some Holocaust thing or some sad, how we overcame this in a pogrom and this and some story of resilience. And it just made me realize that like Jews just love sadness. It's just a strange thing. And that actually that sadness is what gets a lot of Jews to be more motivated. And this has been bothering me for quite some time. And I'm trying to figure this out. Now, I have a friend named Dr. Mark Goldberg who is a psychologist. He's a therapist. And we talked about some other things. But at one point down the road, I don't remember where we were, but we were talking about how pain hurts about 3 times more than pleasure does. If you could, I guess, if you could measure the effect on your brain, the amount that it consumes you, pain is much more significant or substantial as far as what it does to your brain, to your emotions, than pleasure is. For example, let's say, someone dies in someone's family, God forbid. That pain can stay with someone for years. But when someone's born, after the bris or after the kiddush, they're happy about it, but it's not what they think about all day, right? A lot of us have kids. We don't go around our lives saying every day, like, oh my God, I'm so happy because of these kids. But like, if you lose someone every year on Yizkor, every year when something comes up, a lot of people have a really hard time getting past that. If you've ever gambled, right? Everyone remembers their bad, bad, bad losses. They don't really remember the pleasure so much of that one time they won. Like it's hard to associate and bring that back up in your memory so that you can really remember it like to the point that you feel it. Whereas you can really feel that pain when you lost money in the casino. So I started looking into this concept and I thought maybe it could help me relate to why the Jewish people love sadness, why they're so motivated to do good by, anything October 7th related, anything Holocaust related. It's just like, haven't we suffered enough? What are we still suffering about that? Like, that's what motivates us to do good. So I looked this up and there's something called the pleasure and pain principle. Anyone who knows psychology has probably come across this, but it's actually very interesting. And I promise you that the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have an end game here about how to all be better without the pain. So just hear me out. This pleasure and pain principle has a bunch of different elements, but basically it says the same thing, that the human psyche prefers pleasure over pain, and therefore it does what it can to avoid pain, and it does what it can to gain pleasure. Now, because we said that we are much more traumatized than we are joyful from the bad than we are from the good, and that it hits us differently, humans spend their lives avoiding pain much more than they do chasing joy. Because if you don't feel the pain, then nothing happens. You're just going about your business, right? You're kind of in the middle. And if you feel pleasure, that's wonderful. But most people don't necessarily have a way to access that pleasure all the time. So at least they try to just not experience pain. Okay. Now, I came across this psychologist, this motivational speaker, and he basically talks about how there's actually 6 steps to this pain and pleasure theory. The first one is obviously that human beings just want to avoid pain and they want to gain pleasure, which is what I just said. It's basically um, common, obvious, and that because pain is more painful, they than joy is joyful, they'll actually forego pain much more than they will going for pleasure. So, example of that is like, I don't want to lose my job, so I'm going to do what I have to do to not get fired. But at the same time, I'm also not going to go crazy because that would and that if that would get me a raise and make my life better, because that requires a lot more work. Like, it's much easier for me to just not get fired than it is for me to just actually go get a raise or to work hard towards that. So our mind basically says like pain is worse than pleasure is good. So just avoid pain, and if you can get pleasure, great, but like don't put as much effort in it as you have to put in to just not feeling pain. Okay? Now, there's another part of this, which is perception. What is pain and what is pleasure? For each one of us, it's totally different, right? People have different pain thresholds. Some people don't think certain things are even painful. Some things get pleasure, some people get pleasure from something and no pleasure from something else. So there's a big part of pain and pleasure, which is a perception, okay? What we perceive as good, what we perceive as bad. And that has a lot to do with how we define pain and pleasure. Now, in this pain and pleasure theory, time is a big factor. What do I mean by that? Pain and pleasure are facts, right? There's something that for each person could be painful or pleasurable. But when something is more immediate, we give it more attention. Meaning, I will sacrifice pain in the future for immediate pleasure. Like, I will have 19 donuts right now or 5 slices of pizza, not thinking about the pain that it's going to cause to my body later on. Or I can stomach the short-term pain of working out because I gain pleasure from it in the long term. So it's not exactly on a flat timeline. Pain and pleasure are actually very much related as far as how we make our decisions and what motivates us. And that's what this is really all about. The fact that we're also motivated by sadness, by October 7th, by, stories of cancer survivors and resiliency and Holocaust and pogroms and all this other stuff, or just overcoming difficulty. And time has a lot to do with this. So now that we know that time is one of the elements, we want to understand how we make decisions. Now, on top of all of that, emotion actually trumps all logic. So when we feel emotional pain, that really trumps everything. So it doesn't matter what we can justify logically, because if our brain says this is going to hurt me, your mechanism for figuring out, well, does it even make sense? Should I go this way? Should I not? That goes out the window, because once your emotions kick in, which let's just say that your heart is responsible. Really, this is all stuff that your brain does. Your brain accepts prior trauma and then creates the emotion of it and says, okay, well, I don't want to do this anymore because I have an emotion that reminds me of how painful it was in the past. At this point, that's really your brain, even though we like to tell ourselves that that's our heart, but really our mind can overcome all of that. So the rule number 1 says, okay, we want to avoid pain and we want to gain pleasure. Okay, but we want to do more to avoid pain than we do to gain pleasure. But then there's our perception of what is pain and what pleasure is. And then there's the fact that time is a factor, meaning we will do more to avoid immediate pain than gain future pleasure. And then there's this emotional attribute, or this emotional aspect, which says that basically that if you're going to do something that's going to cause you emotional pain right now, you'll do anything you can to avoid it. As opposed to using your logic and saying, yeah, this might cause me short-term emotional pain, but in the long term, I could be logical about this and gain pleasure at a later date that's far from now. Your emotions kick in. So that has to do with, let's say, going to the gym short term or saving money for a retirement plan, how it makes you feel right now trumps all your logic and rhyme and reason, because on paper, it makes sense for you to go to the gym so you can be healthy or to save money so you can retire. But because you never really had that body that you were dying to have from going to the gym, you don't even see the benefits. You have a hard time convincing yourself to feel that there's an active benefit from this. So you're just like, well, is that even real? I don't know. It doesn't feel real. It feels very far away. Even if on paper, someone could show you, a trainer could say, hey, look, if you eat this way for 6 months, if you work out this way for 6 months, it will be painful in the short term and will provide results, because that's what science says. If you don't feel like that, like if your emotion just says, who knows, I'll never have that body, that's when the logic goes fully out the window. Now, the bottom line of all of this, and this is our kicker, is that survival always beats desire. And what that really means for us is that at the end of the day, no matter what we want, survival, and this is where October 7th kicks in, and this is where the Holocaust kicks in, and this is where all the resiliency of every cancer story speech that we ever heard at shul, this is where it all kicks into us. Desire of what we actually want, what our goals are, what is logical to us, what makes sense to us, is always trumped by our desire to survive. Now, as a Jewish people, ever since October 7th, we feel like this is our survival at stake, right? So it motivates us to do stuff. Hashem basically pushed us to the limit and said, guys, I just killed a bunch of you via my evil agent Hamas and Hezbollah and whoever else was shooting rockets at us and killing us. And at the end of the day, all of us came together and just said, you know what? None of this matters right now because we just have to survive, okay? So your instinct kicks in at that point. You have no rhyme or reason or logic. All you care about is survival. Now, the reason this is related to everything that I just said is because the Jewish people have had more of a desire to survive now than any time since the Holocaust. And as history shows, whether it's in the story of Esther or leaving Mitzrayim and going into the Yam Suf, or the Holocaust, or October 7th, we don't really wake up as a nation until survival kicks in. We know what it's like not to survive, unfortunately. That's just how the world has been from the time of creation. But we don't necessarily want to put the work in until Hashem wakes us up. And I think that is the major problem right now. Every single one of us is coming off of this. We got to do this. We got to survive. So it resonates with us when hostages are killed and all of a sudden we get really sad, or when we want hostages to come back. So we do a challah bake, or we do something because we have rachamim, we have mercy, because it feels like us, feels like that could have been me. And that's when our survival kicks in. I think that the major lesson that we need to learn from how we respond during these times is that what if we actually worked hard for the pleasure? Then we wouldn't necessarily have to feel the pain. We wouldn't have to go into survival mode. We wouldn't have to avoid pain and just kind of wing it. See, we've always lived in the neutral until Hashem has forced us to rise up because of the pain, because of survival. What if we gave Hashem a very clear view of who we can be, where we just strive for the pleasure? We strive to be there for each other. We strive to do Torah and mitzvahs. We strive to like each other's stuff, not because someone's dressed in an army costume, or not because someone died and now we feel sad for them. Every time I see a thing of Ishai Ribo playing at some Shiva house, like, that's very nice of Ishai Ribo, and that's very sad that they lost someone. And I just look forward to a world where Ishai Ribo goes to a random person's house and just plays them music just because he loves Jewish people. He doesn't need to wait for someone to die. And this is not about Ishai Ribo or Hanan Ben Ari or whoever it is. But if we can just be good Jews to each other, be good Jews to Hashem, and not just avoid pain all the time, but actually work towards pleasure, then Hashem will give us the ultimate pleasure, which is the time that the world was created for, the time of Mashiach, where there will be no such thing anymore. There will not be a, hey, Hashem has to kick us in the ass and wake us up in order for us to go do something good. We'll just strive for good. And I really hope I get to be here for that with your help. So thanks for listening. If that doesn't make any sense, Google it or reach out.